The biting Alaskan wind whipped across Elias Thorne's face as he adjusted the collar of his fur coat. The Juneau dock in the winter of 1888 was a treacherous tangle of icy, slippery wood, and the frigid air carried the pungent scent of fish, pitch, and snow. Elias, a man in his mid-40s, with hands calloused from a life at sea and in the gold fields, was there to oversee the loading of supplies for his mine in the mountains. The pale sun barely peeked over the snow-capped peaks, casting long, distorted shadows across the harbour. He was watching the stevedores, their robust bodies steaming in the cold, when a faint sound of whimpering caught his attention. At the far end of the dock, near a pile of canvas-covered crates, a small, fragile figure was huddled. As he approached, Elias realized it was a girl, no older than 12, dressed in thin, torn clothes that offered little protection from the cold. Her dark hair was matted and her lips were blue. Beside her, lying on the ground, was an even smaller boy, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, coughing weakly. "Please!" The girl's voice was a hoarse whisper, yet desperate. "Please! Leave me, but save my brother!" Elias felt a tightening in his chest. He'd seen hardship before, plenty of it in the wilds of Alaska, but the raw plea in her eyes struck him deep. The boy coughed again, a wet, rattling sound that spoke of severe illness. "What happened?" Elias asked, his voice rough but kind. He knelt, assessing the boy's feverish face. The girl's eyes, wide with a fear he understood, darted around as if expecting someone to snatch them away. "Our parents, they never came back from the trapping lines," she stammered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "We waited, but we had to come to Juneau for help. He's so sick." She clutched the boy tighter, a desperate, protective gesture. The cold was insidious, seeping into their bones. Elias knew they wouldn't last another night out here. He made a quick decision, one that would change the course of his solitary life. "I won't leave either of you," he stated, his voice firm. He carefully lifted the boy, who felt alarmingly light in his arms, and then extended a hand to the girl. "Come with me. We'll get you both warm and fed." He didn't know what complications this decision would bring, but looking at their faces, he knew it was the only path forward. The girl hesitated for a moment, her gaze searching his face, before slowly taking his outstretched hand. The cold wind howled around them, a chilling welcome to a new, uncertain journey. Elias led the children through the slushy streets of Juneau, the bustling sounds of the mining town a stark contrast to the quiet desperation he'd just witnessed. He took them to his cabin, a sturdy, unassuming structure on the outskirts of town, built from rough-hewn logs and chinked with moss. Inside, a fire crackled warmly in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air, thick with the scent of pine and wood smoke, immediately offered a sense of refuge from the biting cold. "Sit by the fire," he instructed, his voice gentler now. He poured them mugs of hot tea sweetened with a precious lump of sugar and offered them thick slices of sourdough bread with rendered bear fat. The girl, who introduced herself as Lena, eyed him cautiously as she helped her brother Caleb to sip the tea. Caleb, feverish and weak, shivered even by the fire's warmth. His cough worsened, a harsh, tearing sound that filled the small cabin. Elias, despite his rugged exterior, had a pragmatic kindness. He knew the immediate danger was exposure and hunger, but Caleb's persistent cough worried him. He had some rudimentary medical supplies, remnants from a time he'd tried his hand at trapping, including a small bottle of camphor oil. He gently rubbed some on Caleb's chest, hoping to ease his breathing. Lena watched his every move, her young eyes filled with a mixture of fear and dawning hope. We lived in the woods, near the Chilkat," Lena eventually said, her voice still raspy. "Our parents were trappers. They went out a week ago, further than usual, and never returned. We waited days, then walked. It took so long." Her words painted a stark picture of their recent ordeal, a grueling trek through the Alaskan wilderness, alone, with a sick child. The thought of their resilience and the sheer desperation that drove them to Juneau weighed on Elias. He offered them old, clean blankets and showed them to a small corner of the cabin where he had a spare cot. "You can rest here," he told them. "Tomorrow we'll see about getting Caleb proper care." The commitment felt heavy, yet right. As Lena settled Caleb onto the cot, pulling the thick blankets around him, Elias watched, a quiet resolve forming within him. His solitary life was no longer solitary. The next morning, Juneau was enveloped in a thick fog, the kind that made the world seem muted and distant. Elias, with a bundled-up Caleb in his arms and Lena clinging to his coat, made his way to the town's only doctor, a grizzled old man named Dr. Finch, whose office doubled as his cramped living quarters. The air inside was warm, smelling of medicinal herbs and stale tobacco. Dr. Finch, with spectacles perched on his nose, examined Caleb thoroughly, listening to his chest with a worn stethoscope. His face, usually a mask of stoicism, became etched with concern. Caleb's breathing was shallow and ragged, his small body racked with tremors. Lena watched the doctor's face intently, her own reflecting every flicker of emotion she saw. After a long, silence-filled examination, Dr. Finch straightened up, his gaze meeting Elias's. "Pneumonia," he stated, his voice grave. "A bad case, and the boy is severely malnourished, his body weak from exposure. This far gone. It's touch and go, Elias. I'll give him what I can, but it will be a long fight, and there are no guarantees out here." He prescribed a strong cough syrup, advised warm poultices, and emphasized the need for constant warmth and nourishment. Lena gasped, a small, choked sound. "No," she whispered, clutching Elias's leg. "He has to get better. He's all I have." Her eyes pleaded with Elias, then with the doctor, as if her sheer will could override the grim prognosis. Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll do everything, Lena," he promised, his voice steadier than he felt. He paid Dr. Finch with some gold dust, a heavy feeling settling in his gut. The weight of Caleb's fragile life now rested heavily on his shoulders. Returning to the cabin, the fog seemed to press in on them, reflecting the uncertainty that now clouded their fragile new existence. The fight for Caleb's life had truly begun. News of Elias taking in Lena and Caleb spread quickly through Juneau. In a town often hardened by the pursuit of gold and the unforgiving wilderness, acts of selfless compassion, though rare, resonated deeply. Elias, a man known for his solitary nature, found himself the unexpected recipient of quiet support from the community. Old Man Hemlock, a Tlingit elder who traded furs at the docks and often shared a quiet drink with Elias, brought over a small, carved wooden totem, a beaver, known for its industriousness and strong family bonds. "For the little ones," he grunted, his weathered face inscrutable, but his eyes holding a glimmer of approval. "Good medicine." Mrs. O'Malley, the stern but kindly proprietress of the general store, sent over a fresh chicken, rich broth, and a bundle of dried herbs known for their healing properties. "For the boy," she said, her voice gruff, "and for you, Elias. You'll need your strength." Even some of the rougher prospectors, men Elias had only exchanged grunts with, offered to help with chores around the cabin, chopping firewood or hauling water from the well. Lena, initially wary of these strangers, slowly began to relax. She saw the genuine concern in their eyes, the small gestures of support that spoke louder than words. She would sit by Caleb's bedside, clutching the beaver totem, whispering stories to him, trying to coax him back to health. Elias, meanwhile, worked tirelessly. He brewed the herbal teas, changed the poultices, and spoon-fed Caleb tiny sips of broth, constantly monitoring his breathing. The boy's fever fluctuated, a terrifying dance between hope and despair. There were nights Elias didn't sleep, sitting by the cot, listening to every shallow breath, every weak cough. One particularly harsh night, a blizzard raged outside, rattling the cabin windows. Caleb's breathing became even more labored. Elias felt a cold dread creep over him. Lena, despite her exhaustion, refused to leave her brother's side. As the storm howled, the simple acts of kindness from the community seemed to form an invisible shield around their little cabin, a silent testament to the resilience of human connection in the face of Alaska's harsh realities. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more chapters of this gripping story. Days bled into a week, and Caleb's condition remained precarious. Elias and Lena maintained a constant vigil, their faces etched with exhaustion and worry. The cabin had become a quiet sanctuary, the only sounds being Caleb's labored breathing and the crackle of the fire. Lena, though young, showed remarkable resilience. She would hum old lullabies her mother used to sing, hoping the familiar melodies would bring comfort to her ailing brother. One frigid morning, as Elias was preparing a fresh batch of broth, he heard a different sound from Caleb's cot, a soft, clear cough, less rattling than before. He rushed over, and Lena, who had been dozing in a chair, startled awake. Caleb's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in days they held a flicker of awareness, a hint of his former self. His skin, though still pale, felt less burning to Elias's touch. "Lena?" Caleb whispered, his voice weak but distinct. Lena gasped, tears springing to her eyes. "Caleb, you're awake!" She threw her arms around him, careful not to jostle his small frame. Elias felt a wave of profound relief wash over him, so intense it almost buckled his knees. The turning point, subtle yet unmistakable, had finally arrived. From that day forward, Caleb began to slowly mend. His fever broke completely, his cough gradually lessened, and he started to take more nourishment. The community's offerings, from Mrs. O'Malley's chicken broth to the Tlingit elders' calming teas, seemed to have truly become good medicine. The cabin, once filled with the heavy air of illness, now breathed with the fragile promise of recovery. Elias found himself watching the children with a newfound tenderness, the unexpected family he had stumbled upon becoming an integral part of his world. As Caleb slowly regained his strength, the dynamic within Elias's small cabin began to shift. Lena, no longer consumed by fear for her brother, started to emerge from her shell. She was a quick and observant child, eager to help. She learned to mend Elias's worn clothing, helped prepare simple meals, and even took on the task of keeping the fire stoked, her small hands surprisingly adept with the kindling. Elias, in turn, found himself speaking more, sharing snippets of his life in the mines and on the trapping trails. He taught Lena how to identify animal tracks in the snow outside the cabin and pointed out constellations in the vast Alaskan night sky. He even showed her how to whittle small pieces of wood, and she painstakingly carved a tiny bear, a testament to her growing confidence. Caleb, though still frail, listened intently to their conversations, his eyes following Elias with a quiet admiration. The boy's recovery was slow but steady, each day bringing a little more color to his cheeks and a little more strength to his limbs. He clung to Lena, his protector, but also began to reach out to Elias, his new guardian. One afternoon, while Elias was mending a trap, Caleb, with surprising determination, shuffled over and placed a small, smooth river stone in his hand. It was a gesture of trust, a silent thank you. The bond forming between the three was quiet, unspoken, yet undeniably powerful. Elias, who had always valued his solitude, found himself enjoying the companionship, the small sounds of life that now filled his cabin. The children, stripped of their former lives by tragedy, were slowly, tentatively beginning to re-establish a sense of belonging. The harsh Alaskan winter outside continued its relentless grip. But inside the small cabin, a family was quietly, authentically, taking root. As spring gradually began to loosen winter's icy grip on Juneau, bringing longer daylight hours and the promise of thawing trails, an unsettling undercurrent began to ripple through Elias's newfound peace. The town, while generally supportive, was also a hotbed of gossip and speculation, especially when it came to mysterious newcomers. Questions about Lena and Caleb's parents, their sudden disappearance, and the circumstances that led the children to Juneau inevitably arose. One afternoon, while Elias was trading furs at the general store, he overheard two prospectors muttering. "Heard they were trappers, up near the Chilkat," one rasped. "Funny, ain't it? Just vanished. And no one else saw hide nor hair of those kids before Elias brought 'em in." The insinuation, though unspoken, hung heavy in the air. Something wasn't quite right. Elias dismissed it, but the whispers persisted. Some speculated that the parents had simply abandoned the children, unable to cope with the harsh realities of the frontier. Others hinted at more sinister possibilities, given the dangerous nature of the Alaskan wilderness and the rough characters it attracted. Elias knew Lena's story was true. The raw pain in her eyes had been undeniable. But he also understood the suspicion that a sudden, unexplained disappearance could breed in a remote community. Lena herself became more withdrawn when questions arose about her parents. She would clutch Caleb's hand tighter, her gaze becoming distant and troubled. Elias saw the fear in her eyes, a resurgence of the vulnerability he had first witnessed on the dock. He realized that while they had escaped the immediate dangers of the wilderness, they were now navigating a different kind of threat, the judgment and suspicion of a small, isolated community. He felt a fierce, protective instinct rise within him. He had taken them in, and he would protect their truth, even if it meant confronting the uncomfortable whispers of the past. The murmurs in Juneau intensified, fueled by idle hands and the ever-present yearning for drama in the quiet, isolated town. A local, particularly nosy resident named Silas Finch, no relation to the doctor, began to openly question Elias. Silas was a man who thrived on gossip and enjoyed stirring trouble, often resentful of Elias's quiet success in the mines. One day, Silas confronted Elias directly near the assay office, his voice carrying in the crisp air. "Say, Elias, about those children. Folks are wondering why no one saw 'em arrive or knew their parents. Seems a mite convenient, them just turning up on your dock, eh?" He smirked, implying something nefarious. Elias's jaw tightened. He met Silas's gaze, his eyes cold and unwavering. "They were abandoned, Silas. Freezing and starving. I took them in. Is that a problem for you?" Silas scoffed. "Just seems a bit too neat. A man like you, suddenly with 2 extra mouths. Unless there's something to gain." The accusation was clear. Perhaps Elias had found something valuable with the children, or perhaps their story was a convenient cover for something else. The tension in the air was palpable. Elias knew a fight would only fuel Silas's narrative. He also knew he couldn't let such accusations stand. "There's nothing to gain, Silas," Elias stated, his voice low and dangerous. "Only 2 lives to save. And if you continue to spread such vile rumors, you'll find out what a man like me is capable of to protect what's mine." His words, delivered with quiet intensity, carried a clear warning. Silas, recognizing the steel in Elias's gaze, visibly flinched and mumbled an excuse, retreating quickly. Later, back in the cabin, Elias looked at Lena and Caleb, who were quietly playing by the fire. He realized the challenges weren't just the cold and hunger. It was the judgment, the suspicion, the constant battle against a world that didn't always understand or accept simple kindness. Protecting them meant more than just providing food and shelter. It meant shielding them from the harshness of human nature itself. Months turned into a year, each passing season etching deeper lines of familiarity and belonging onto Lena and Caleb's faces. The Alaskan seasons cycled through with their dramatic shifts, from the lingering twilight of winter, when the cabin's hearth was their world, to the endless daylight of summer, bursting with life and possibility. Lena and Caleb, no longer the fragile waifs Elias had found, had truly blossomed under his unwavering care. Caleb, though still smaller than other boys his age, was now an energetic and curious whirlwind, his boisterous laughter often echoing through the cabin, a stark contrast to the quiet whimpers Elias first heard. Lena, now 13, had grown taller, her once haunted dark eyes replaced by a quiet confidence and a burgeoning independence. She embraced responsibilities, helping Elias tend a small, surprisingly fertile garden patch in summer, coaxing resilient vegetables from the Alaskan soil, and becoming adept at assisting with preparing game in winter, her hands steady and efficient. Elias, in turn, had found a rhythm to his life he never anticipated, a profound shift from his previous solitude. His quiet, solitary existence was now replaced by the lively, comforting presence of the children. He patiently taught Caleb basic trapping skills, showing him how to set snares with care and identify subtle animal tracks in the snow, instilling in him a respect for the wilderness. Lena, with her keen eye for detail, proved to be an adept learner in foraging for berries and edible plants during the brief, vibrant summer months, her memory for trails and species remarkable. They often went on short excursions together, Elias pointing out the wonders of the Alaskan wilderness, the majestic eagles soaring overhead, their calls echoing through the valleys, the vibrant salmon leaping tirelessly in the rivers, the quiet, profound beauty of the snow-draped forests where silence reigned supreme. The whispers in Juneau had largely subsided, fading like morning mist. The community had witnessed the genuine change in Elias and the undeniable health and happiness of the children. The simple, undeniable truth of Elias's selfless act had, over time, outweighed the initial suspicions, like the steady flow of a glacier carving away doubt. He was no longer just Elias Thorne, the solitary miner, a man of mystery. He was Elias Thorne, the man who had taken in the orphaned children, a quiet pillar of unexpected compassion in a harsh land. One crisp autumn evening, as they sat by the fire, the inviting scent of roasting rabbit filling the warm cabin, Lena looked at Elias, her gaze direct and full of a depth of emotion beyond her years. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper, yet resonating with profound gratitude, "for everything. You saved us." Caleb, nestled comfortably against Elias's leg, nodded in solemn agreement, his small hand instinctively reaching for Elias's large, calloused one. Elias looked at their faces, bathed in the warm, flickering glow of the firelight, and in that moment he realized he had found something more valuable than any gold in these frozen lands. A family, forged not by blood, but by shared hardship, unwavering compassion, and the profound, enduring choice to care. Years passed, each one adding layers to the rich, complex fabric of Alaskan life. Lena and Caleb, no longer children, grew into strong, capable young adults, their spirits as resilient as the spruce trees that dotted the landscape, their roots deeply entwined with the unforgiving yet beautiful land. Juneau, too, continued its relentless expansion, the promise of gold still drawing new faces and fortunes, but it retained its core of hardy, resilient individuals who understood the true nature of survival in the north. Lena, with her sharp mind and practical nature, became an invaluable asset to Elias's mining operation. She learned to meticulously manage the accounts, keeping track of every ounce of gold and every expenditure. She expertly organized supplies, ensuring nothing was wasted in the remote wilderness. and she even confidently negotiated with merchants, her intelligence and quiet resolve earning her widespread respect throughout town. She developed a keen, intuitive understanding of the land and its rhythms, often accompanying Elias on prospecting trips, her presence a comforting, constant presence by his side, sharing the burden and the triumph. Caleb, now a strapping young man, inherited Elias's profound love for the wilderness. He became an expert trapper and hunter, his movements silent and assured, navigating the treacherous trails with ease and an intimate knowledge of the animals and their habits. He often selflessly helped the community, guiding bewildered newcomers through the labyrinthine mountains or assisting with difficult hauls. His quiet strength and steady kindness, a clear echo of the man who had rescued him years ago. Elias, though showing the inevitable signs of age, the lines around his eyes deeper, his movements a touch slower, carried a peace he had never known in his solitary years. His cabin, once a bachelor's Spartan refuge, was now a vibrant, bustling home, filled with the warmth of shared meals, the echoing sound of laughter, and the quiet comfort of family. He had watched Lena and Caleb thrive, not just survive, overcoming their past and embracing their future, and in their growth he saw his own purpose profoundly affirmed. On a clear, starlit night, as the aurora borealis painted the Alaskan sky with ethereal greens and purples, a breathtaking ballet of light, Elias stood on the porch of his cabin, Lena and Caleb standing silently beside him. The air was crisp, clean, carrying the distant, comforting scent of pine. He had built a life here, against all odds, a life that was rich not in gold, but in connection, in the unbreakable bonds of family. The future was unwritten, as it always was in Alaska, unpredictable and wild, but as long as they had each other and the enduring spirit of the North etched into their very beings, they knew they could face whatever lay ahead. Their story, born from a desperate plea on a frozen dock, had become a powerful testament to the unexpected warmth that could be found even in the coldest, most unforgiving of lands. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more chapters of this gripping story.